I love Star Wars. It's in my DNA. And I also love war films. I didn't love Rogue One.
Save the rebellion! Save the dream!
Don't believe the hype, at least not those first Twitter reactions. When I'm posting my review, the embargo has just been lifted and I'm so curious to see what everybody's thinking about the movie. I really like to discuss it with other Star Wars fans and I also want to know what the common moviegoer thinks about it. But right now I'm in the dark and I only got those raving first impressions after the premiere, and on the other hand my personal take on it and that of two fellow friends, one being a Star Wars fan himself while the other is more of a straightforward serious film critic. I just have to say it, I didn't enjoy the movie that much. It's not terrible, it's not bad, it's decent enough and it has some stuff to like, but I had such high hopes for it to be great. I know high expectations are always a problem, but that I get disappointed to such a degree was a big surprise to me. It was a really sad day for me, and before some people like to hate, how could I? The movie must be the best thing ever. Well, maybe you will like it. Like I said, right now I'm really lost. But believe me, I want to like every movie I'm going to see. And the Star Wars film, are you kidding me? I wanted to love it. Don't think I gain anything by going on the internet with an early review of a Star Wars movie and do anything but praise it. It would have been better if I loved it. It would have been better for me, my channel, my health. But unfortunately it was a big letdown. So finally, without further ado, let's get into it. How do we do this? While I was on my long way back home today, I texted with one of the two friends who saw the movie as well, and I just wrote everything down that was on my tormented Star Wars soul. Okay, now I'm exaggerating. Again, it's not a bad movie. But here's what I texted. You know what? Before we do that, let's talk about the stuff I liked. I think that's always the better way to approach a movie. While not on par with The Force Awakens, they continue to give you that practical, lived-in world feeling. Most of the world feels surreal and gritty. Where I had a pretty good time was with the last act. The finale, the action, the set pieces, most of it, not all, were exciting. But now for the list. Number 1, and it's the first issue because it's such an important one. The characters aren't that strong. After falling in love with Rey, Finn, Poe and Kylo last year, of course I was hoping to do the same with Jyn Erso, Cassian Andor, Orson Krennic and the rest of the bunch. But I didn't. It's not that Rey, Finn, Poe and Co were the best written characters of all time, but it's the combination of great performances, the chemistry between them and also very important, the story they are involved. Jyn is our main lead, she and Cassian as well, but even though we see her as a small child and yes, there are flashbacks now in Star Wars, and why not? But she stayed strangely vague and unrelatable for most of the movie. I won't give you a complete character analysis because I simply can't. I watched it one time, it's Star Wars, so you can guess it, it's pretty fast moving. These are only my first impressions and I could also change with a second viewing. With Cassian it's more difficult. I think he has interesting aspects, he might be actually one of the most scrupulous heroes so far. I mean, Cassian definitely shot first. But while there is more going on with him, I thought Diego Luna and the whole direction by Gareth Edwards were lacking real charisma. It was similar to my experience with Edwards' last movie Godzilla, where I couldn't find a connection to the characters as well. I did like Ben Mendelsohn's performance and his character Orson Krennic. He was a different kind of villain. I thought he was intriguing, but then there were some issues there as well. He's menacing, but not as menacing as I would have liked. Not because of his performance, but because of the way the character is written, which overall turned out to be a problem for me, because even we got him, Vader, and a third guy, and of course that big round Death Star, and the movie's pretty gritty, which I liked, and yet the threat level isn't as high as for example in The Empire Strikes Back. Krennic's relationship with Jyn's father Galen Erso, played by Mikkelsen, isn't fleshed out that much, but I thought it was totally fine. It's Star Wars, and through the few scenes they shared, enough history was transported for me. I personally checked the novel Catalyst, which was just released a few weeks ago, and there's definitely more there, but for the movie I think it was perfectly alright. But let's continue with the list. Confusing plot. It's not that the story was super complicated, it's more the way the whole narrative unfolds. In the very first 20 minutes alone we jump around 4, Yes, 4 different planets and each of them has a text with them, so we know the name of it for 10 seconds until we forget. I'm not sure if muddled is the right term, but I wasn't feeling very well with the way the movie was telling its story. But a second viewing might change that notion. Maybe. A little bit. Number 3, and this might be considered a mild spoiler, but actually it's not spoiling anything and it was officially hinted at from Kathleen Kennedy herself. But if you want to make absolutely sure, skip to whatever number is on the screen. Alright, there was no opening crawl. I knew that going into the movie, and yet after seeing it, the decision still baffles me. Of course they want to differentiate those spin-off movies from the main saga, but there are different ways to do that, and after just saying that I thought the story was a little bit confusing, this might have been a perfect way to make things more clear. The crawl is perfect for some introduction before jumping right into the action. See, I had a dream, and that dream was to invite my whole family each year to the newest Star Wars movie. Last Christmas I went with my siblings, parents and even my both grandmas to the theater to see The Force Awakens. Normally they almost never go to the movies, but Star Wars does that. I know that they didn't understand everything going on, but they had a good time. Well, now I have to look for a different Christmas present, because there is no way on Mustafar that my grandparents will have any clue what exactly is going on here. Should that be a criterion? Maybe not, but then maybe it should. Rogue One has a pretty rough time standing on its own. Speaking of standing on its own, it has its own score, and for the first time it's not by John Williams. This was my number 4 on the list. The lack of powerful music. I won't say Michael Giacchino did a bad job. I like to listen to the soundtrack on its own when it's coming out, but right now I thought the music was one of the weakest aspects of the whole movie. There were some promising parts, like that strange tune that is heard when we get introduced to the planet Jeddah, but overall not very memorable. And as a die-hard Star Wars fan, it's maybe not so much that the music was not good, but that the music wasn't the John Williams score or his way of scoring those images. Of course, it's a good idea to try something new, but for me it didn't work at all. Even when it's a new movie, it's still the same Star Destroyers, the same X-Wing starfighters. It's still Star Wars, but it doesn't sound like Star Wars. Speaking of John Williams, here comes a shameless plug. A friend and mine just did our top 10 best Star Wars tracks, so if you still want to give me a chance, check it out. Let's see, number 5 is a little bit hard to describe, and maybe it was again because of the music. But even if there are some really cool shots in the movie, somehow it lacked power and energy. The Force Awakens pushed you forward the whole way with only some moments to relax. Rogue One felt kind of off, unbalanced and even clumsy at times. The best shots are in the trailers, and seeing them on a huge IMAX screen didn't have the impact it should have had. Maybe there's something wrong with me. Number 6 is a fast one. Overall, the movie is not as funny as The Force Awakens by a long shot. And that's fine and good, because there isn't another Star Wars movie that's as funny as The Force Awakens, and as this is more like a real war movie, it shouldn't be joking around that much. But the jokes that are in the movie are hit and miss. Some were quite nice, some felt very forced. Yeah, like that. The same goes for the references to the whole saga. The Millennium Falcon in The Force Awakens and that little cue of the fanfare, great. But in Rogue One, many of your typical Star Wars things felt alien to me. And then there is fan service that's just a little bit too much, at least for me. So number 7 on my list is just me pointing out again that we are on 4 different planets in the first 20 minutes. And number 8 is heavy spoiler territory, so that's a no-go. But number 9, we can talk about that just briefly. Putting Donnie Yen and Wen Jiang in the movie was a great idea. Their introduction and the first action scene Yen's character is involved in is quite cool. Since we don't get a real Jedi in Rogue One, and that's good, it's cool to see some other way of fighting here. But with the light side, there's always the dark side as well. While I felt Yen and Jiang had a great chemistry, their place in the whole team of rebel outcasts wasn't that well developed, which brings me to a big issue I have with the movie. The whole team doesn't get to that point where I want to fight with this group, where I want to join them. The team dynamic wasn't there for me, and that's a shame. There are some speeches, but none got to me, and the dialogues are somewhere between quite good and sometimes close to the prequels as well. Also, but that's kind of a nitpicky thing, Donnie Yen's character has kind of a mantra, and I thought it was annoying and out of place, unfortunately. Number 10 and 11 on my list crossed that spoiler territory once again. Even though I don't think it's much of a spoiler, but then again, it's Star Wars, so what isn't a spoiler? So without spoiling anything, I try to move around it a little bit. There is one CGI character in the movie. Actually, there are more, of course, but I'm talking just about one here that's absolutely horrendous. Now, it's not a new droid K2SO, who by the way was okay, but also kind of hit and miss again. The one I'm talking about will make your jaw drop, and for me, not in a good way. It's not just uncanny valley, it's sad on a different level as well. Moving on, number 11 concerns my favorite movie villain of all time, and that's of course Darth Vader. There are good things, there are bad things, some are nitpicky again, but some are not. Overall he was absolutely okay, but I should get goosebumps hearing James Earl Jones again, and I just didn't. Most of his scenes felt kind of unreal and fake, and the way he was incorporated into the plot wasn't satisfying for me. Alright, number 12 just reads Ich weiß nicht, which is German and means I don't know. And number 13 reads fuck. Not because the movie was so bad, but because I was so down. Number 14 is me saying there's just a tiny little bit of that Hobbit problem, which means the movie wants to be its own thing, and yet there have to be those connections. Not the same, since this is so very connected to A New Hope, but some of the connections are great, while others felt not so good. It's called a Star Wars story, but I didn't feel that excitement. The stuff I loved was on the screen right in front of me, but this time it didn't come together. The pieces didn't fit. Some of it was muddled, some of it confusing, some characters underwritten, some performances off, some story beats rushed, some gags and references fell flat, and the music never grabbed me. You could go into more detail about all of those things, and after just one viewing it's difficult to try to analyze it. But you know what's sad? It's a Star Wars movie, and I don't feel the excitement to go back to it immediately. So how do I rank it? There were just too many things bothering me. Right now I can't go higher than 6 out of 10. Not a bad movie at all, but it's a high bar for me when it comes to Star Wars. That was my longest review ever on this channel and a very difficult one to do. So please don't hate me, but comment below, let me know what you think about Rogue One. Did it meet your expectations? Where do you rank it? For me, it's behind the original trilogy and also behind The Force Awakens as well, which I think is a much better, much more powerful and energetic film. But it's still before the prequels. Actually, this is a prequel as well, so maybe the term is just cursed. If you believe me that I'm not a troll, you can hit me up on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram simply at TheJimmyCage. And if you somehow like this video, give me a thumbs up, share, subscribe, whatever you like.
You are not my